Hey guys, today's story is about a decision that ended a 2-year campaign and 3 different friendships. So let me preface this with the fact that I have no ill will towards anyone that is mentioned in the story, as people. And with this being said, I still think about this particular incident a lot, and genuinely think that it has made me really fearful of playing RPGs and RPing in general, and hopefully, through getting this out, I'll be able to find the confidence to keep playing and start to play more RP-heavy characters again. And this story is a bit long, so bear with me. So, to set the scene, I was in a campaign of roughly 7 players, plus the DM. Most players were unimportant to the horror that unfolded, so I won't go through introducing them all, but the main players that this story does involve are the blacksmith dwarf, who was the best friend of the DM, the wizard, who was the wife of the blacksmith dwarf and also great friends with the DM himself, who was my friend and ex who got me into D&D and introduced me to the group. And then there was myself playing a elf rogue, and this was my first ever campaign. The game started pretty well. I played a high elf rogue who was very clumsy, except when it came to having a weapon in their hand. This led to a very successful first session where I dove headfirst into RPing and had a really good payoff from the party all loving it. As time progressed, I found that it had become harder and harder to engage the other players into roleplaying, and it felt more and more like every person at the table was either disengaged or was only roleplaying to progress their own personal plotline, rather than trying to build one together. That being said, however, I was very much enjoying playing my character and exploring the world that the DM had created for us, so I continued along. After about 2 years in, which with us playing monthly, this was about session 20 at level 7, we were able to enter into a dungeon. After a while of exploring and fighting, we found that this was the place where the ancestors of the dwarves were created, and was a holy place for the dwarven people. We also discovered that this place had been taken over by a djinn that was controlling the last of the ancient dwarven race. Naturally, given our dwarf party member, we rallied to help him return the place to peace and went to fight the djinn. And upon entering the boss room, we encountered the djinn and 6 Aztecs who were being controlled using a magical artifact in the shape of a hammer held by the djinn. And we rolled for combat, and the encounter began. I was last in initiative, and everyone else engaged into one-on-one combat with the Aztecs, all except for me. The djinn went before me, and he dropped the hammer so that he could attack the party, and luckily, I was hidden behind cover. As I had a straight shot at the hammer, and I was the only one with enough speed to actually reach it, I ran for the hammer and picked it up. My intention was to get it to the dwarf so that he could use it to free his ancestors. This, however, is not what happened. When I picked up the hammer, my character was immediately overwhelmed by a vision of what had happened to the Aztecs, and how they became enslaved, and I was given a choice. I could continue to enslave the dwarves, or set them free. Feeling that this wasn't a choice that I should make, I asked the DM if I could just throw the hammer to the dwarf, or just drop it instead. The DM refused, stating that it was fused to my hand until I made a choice. So, obviously, as our goal was to free the race, and I was out of movement speed, I chose to free them. And once this happened, the Aztecs stopped attacking the party and turned on the djinn, thus defeating him. My character walked over to my teammate and tried to offer the hammer to him, but his character turned his back on me, walked out of the room without saying a word, and then the DM called the session to an end. After the session, I felt confused and annoyed that I had been forced into that choice, but ultimately chose to move on as it was what I thought was the decision that my character would have made in that situation. That night, I got a call from my DM telling me that he had just been called by the wizard, and she had informed him that the dwarf had been telling her just how upset he was about my choice as a player, and that he thinks that I was out to get him and ruin his experience by making the session about me. I asked the DM what he thought, and he told me that he agreed with the dwarf. Because
I should have known that the session was the climax for his character, and backed off and done nothing on my turn, or just attacked like everyone else.
And when I explained that I had intended to get the item to the dwarf, and was just trying to help him, I kept getting met with the response of,
"Well, he doesn't see it like that."
So I explained again that it wasn't my intention, and asked, "Why did you let me get the vision then, if it was so important that his character got it?" And his response?
"Well, I have more faith in my players that they will know these things and make the right choice."
So are all your players supposed to be frickin' mind readers then, buddy boy? Like really, how the heck was the OP supposed to know that you weren't going to allow them to just put the hammer down or not give it to the desired person? This conversation ended up getting heated and turned into a fight, and ultimately a blame game. We ended the conversation agreeing that I would contact the dwarf when everything had calmed down and explain things to him myself, and we left it there. After a few days, I messaged the dwarf and apologized for taking away from his experience at the table, and explained that it wasn't my intent. I went through what my plan was and how I was trying to help, and did what I thought was best game-wise with the options that I had available to me. He went on to tell me that he didn't believe that, and that he felt that it was me, as a player, deliberately trying to ruin his gaming experience, and that I was trying to hurt him as a person. I again apologized and told him that that wasn't the case, but after being friends for 3 years at this point, I was shocked that he thought that I would do something like this. He basically ended the conversation after that with an
"Apology accepted,"
and nothing in return. Having been upset, but trying to move on, I encountered the dwarf and the wizard at the DM's party about 4 or 6 months later, and tried to talk to them normally and continue our friendship. Basically along the thought process of, I have apologized, and it's just a game, so I'm sure it will be fine, right? Wrong. They iced me out hard, didn't speak to me, gave one-word answers when we were in a group conversation, and basically made me uncomfortable the whole night. After the party, I messaged the wizard and asked what was wrong, and she explained it to me that, due to my actions in the game session, she no longer thought that I was a good person. She believed that I deliberately hurt the dwarf, and that what I did hurt them to the core of who they are, and that it told them who I am as a person. She then went on to tell me that she is willing to be friends again, but only if I put in the hard work to earn their trust back. Gobsmacked, I decided that if after 3 years of friendship, if one misstep in D&D was all it took to ruin it, it wasn't a friendship that I wanted, and walked away from them both. Since then, I haven't spoken to either of them, and my relationship with the DM is strained, and we barely speak anymore due to the awkwardness of the fight that we had, and the fallout between me and his best friends. The game, safe to say, has been cancelled. I honestly still don't know if I really badly messed up, and just can't see it, or if this whole situation was a massive overreaction by them. But now I just stick to low RP type of characters who just only really exist to push the plot along because I'm scared to ruin more friendships. Any opinions on this would be helpful, as I still don't understand what I did wrong. Well, OP, I can tell you exactly what you did wrong. You have crappy friends. That's it. Honestly, I don't really have too much to say on this whole thing other than that the friends of the DM and the DM themselves to a degree are just man-children. And whatever the female equivalent for the wife is of a man-child. Karen? I don't know. These people obviously didn't value their friendship with the OP. That much is clear. And the DM not allowing the OP to just drop the hammer or give it to the dwarf or not make the decision or something as such, well, I question his ability to be a good DM. Even if he can tell a good story, I still wouldn't want him as a DM if that's the kind of crap he pulls. Overall, I think it is still a fairly minor thing though, as a DM and whatnot, because if the whole idea for this campaign was just for the dwarven people to be saved and not be slaves anymore, well, that still happened, right? Everyone got what they wanted in that campaign still. The only thing that happened here was the dwarf wasn't able to get his moment of glory. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I really think that you getting upset that you weren't the one allowed to have the moment of glory when you still, as a party, succeeded in the goal? You're a man-child. Grow up. Suck it up. But anyway, that's the end of this one. Let me know what you guys think of this in the comments, and as always, have a good one.